Hello. Today is Tuesday of the second week of Advent. We have the two Advent candles lit in the Advent wreath, and we're continuing the story of Ishtar's Odyssey, written by Arnold Detrida. Today's chapter is titled Enemies. Ishtar tried to search the face of his father for a clue, but darkness kept it secret. Only the light of the special star lit Salamar, which gave him the appearance of a ghost. "What is it, father?" Ishtar asked. "What is the secret?" Salamar sighed. "I had hoped not to burden you, my son, but circumstances have forced it." "What circumstances? Forced what?" "Ishtar, the millet you ate for breakfast on that second day was not spoiled. It was poisoned." "What?" Ishtar shouted. "And the snake in your tent," Salamar continued, "did not crawl there on its own. There was no hole anywhere in the fabric." Ishtar's mind was spinning so fast that he could fit no two thoughts together. "You mean," he said, "you mean someone is trying to destroy the caravan?" Salamar shook his head. "No, my son. Someone is trying to destroy you." Once when he was young, Ishtar had been running across the palace without looking, and ran straight into a stone wall. His father's words now felt the same way. I... Salamar grasped his son's shoulder firmly. "You will be safe, Ishtar. Kazim and Varta and I will protect you. But what? But we must take a few further precautions. Varta will keep a careful watch over your millet and water and other food. And she has sharp eyes, sharper than Kazim's. She will watch for any assassin that may approach in the night." Ishtar didn't look so sure, so Salamar added, "Our culture may place women below men in importance, Ishtar, but you will learn as you grow that there is little or nothing a man can do that a woman cannot." Accepting this with a nod, Ishtar asked, "What else?" "I am assigning these two soldiers to you." Ishtar looked at the men on the horses and thought they looked more dangerous than any assassin. "Mahmud and Yazdan have been at my side for many years, and I trust them with my life and with yours." There was silence for a moment until Salamar finally said, "Ishtar, what do you say?" "Oh, oh, I thank you for your loyal service to my father's house, and I ask the gods to give you good health and safety from the many bad things that evil and bad..." Ishtar had no idea how to finish his sentence. Mahmud laughed and smiled warmly. "You are most welcome, young prince." Instantly, Ishtar's opinion of the men changed. Not only did they seem kind, they had just saved him from an embarrassing social disaster. Salamar leaned in close and lowered his voice. "I did not wish for you to carry the burden of this knowledge, Ishtar, but we will soon celebrate the 11th year of your birth, and I think you are old enough to know the truth. And now that you know, you see how terribly important it is to follow all of our rules and to do exactly what Kazim and the others tell you." Ishtar lowered his head. "Yes, father." And that's how Ishtar found himself flanked by Mahmud on his left, Yazdam on his right, and Kazim behind him. The camel puller brought Varta's camel from the back of the file up to the front, even as the caravan kept moving. He saw Varta sitting high in the saddle, her head constantly scanning the black night ahead. "Can she even see anything?" Ishtar asked Kazim. "She has the vision of a horse," Kazim answered. "As long as there's a star in the sky, a horse can see the road clearly, even when his rider sees only darkness." Ishtar nodded and began the long business of riding through the night. And so it went, for many weeks, rising from sleep just as the day ended to strike the camp and load the camels. Endless hours of walking the hard and rocky dirt in this empty land, riding atop Musa on moonless nights, taking lessons in horsemanship, swordsmanship, and archery in the cool of the morning, sleeping through the hot hours of the afternoon, millet for breakfast, millet for lunch, millet for dinner, and then camping at dawn to start it all again. Through it all, Ishtar's mind would never let him forget that somewhere in the caravan lived an assassin appointed to kill him. One morning during his lessons, Ishtar was distracted by people shouting. Through the crowd, he could see a man from another file, waist deep in sand. The people formed a circle a good distance away from him, and a woman was screaming for someone to save her husband. The man sank lower and lower until the sand almost reached his chin. "Kazim, you must go help!" Ishtar yelled. "My duty is to you," Kazim answered. "I cannot allow myself to be distracted from that duty, for such are the tricks of thieves and assassins." Ishtar didn't understand. Finally, a soldier on a horse threw the man a rope and pulled him to safety. "What was that?" Ishtar asked. "It was the devil sand," Kazim answered. "It is invisible to the eye, but waits to swallow any who wander into its mouth." Ishtar thought for a moment and then asked, "Would you have let the man die rather than leave my side?" Kazim looked at his ward slowly. "It is my sworn duty to protect you, Ishtar. I could not lower my diligence to save that man, nor could I save Varta or even your father. My life is for you alone." Ishtar thought about this for a very long time as he prepared for bed, and fell asleep with those thoughts still in his mind. One morning, a swarm of locusts descended on the camp as Ishtar ate his dinner. One locust fell into Ishtar's millet, but he was so tired he didn't even care. He scooped up the millet, locust and all, and slurped it into his mouth. A bit crunchy, he thought, but not bad. From that moment on, he began trying all sorts of things to improve the taste of the millet. On a few occasions, they stopped and set up camp near a caravan that was just starting their day. Each caravan was different, speaking different languages, wearing different clothes, and believing in different gods. On a particularly hot morning, after the camp was set up and most people were already asleep, Kazim was putting the last stake in Ishtar's tent with his back to the desert. Ishtar could barely keep his eyes open, he was so tired. But then something caught his eye, something bright red sitting on the sand about 50 camel paces away. Ishtar squinted and then jumped wide awake. It was a pomegranate! Suddenly visions of juicy pomegranate sliding down his tongue filled Ishtar's head. He started to run. "Ishtar, stop!" The command came from Kazim, but Ishtar was so tired it was several seconds before his brain understood the order and sent it to his feet. By then he'd gone 3 more strides, and he suddenly felt the ground crumble, and his feet grabbed by some strange force. Kazim slid to a stop as he yelled for Mahmud and Yazdan. "Ishtar, do not move! Do not even wiggle your toes!" Now Ishtar could feel the ground sucking at his ankles, and he looked up, terrified. "It is the devil's sand!" Kazim yelled. "You will not sink if you do not move!" The 2 other bodyguards arrived and threw a rope to Ishtar. "Tie it around your waist," Kazim said. After Ishtar had done this, the bodyguards pulled slightly. "Now lift 1 foot very slowly and take a step. Then lift the other one, but you must move slowly." By now Salamar had been summoned and came running up. "Do exactly as Kazim says," he yelled to Ishtar. The muck was now halfway to Ishtar's knees. Ever so slowly he pulled up his right leg. At first his foot wouldn't move, but then it started to pull free. With a sucking sound, his right foot finally popped out of the sand. He took a step toward his father, and as he slowly pulled his left foot out, his right foot began to sink, but not as far as before. Working his way forward with the rope around his waist giving him confidence, he eventually reached solid ground. He threw his arms around his father's waist, trembling. "I'm sorry, Father," he said. "I just saw that fresh pomegranate and thought how good it would taste." Kazim had been staring at the fruit where it still lay, several rope throws away. "What is a fresh pomegranate doing in the desert, in the middle of a bed of devil's sand?" He and Salamar looked at each other, then looked across the huge circle of a camp with its hundreds of people settled for sleep. "Would it have sucked me into the ground?" Ishtar asked his father. "It is very unlikely. Most times a person sinks only to his knees and is stuck. More likely a passing snake or scorpion would have found you." "But it is possible I could have been sucked under?" Salamar nodded. "Yes, it is possible." Several days later, Ishtar saw two men on horseback riding fast toward the caravan. He knew these were two of the guards who constantly scouted ahead for trouble. They reported to Rasad and Salamar, who then jumped on horses themselves and followed the men over the next hill. Ishtar was dying to know what was happening, but he could only wait, slowly following the caravan up and down the barren hills. 2 hills later, Salamar and Rasad returned. "We are coming upon Zelzele," Salamar said out of breath. "I have spoken to my friend Moez, and he is alive, and all his family." Ishtar thought he'd never seen his father so happy. "You shall meet them this very morning," Salamar said. "Who is he?" Ishtar asked. "A friend from the travels of my youth." Ishtar was already thinking about the banquets and fine meals they'd be eating in Zelzele. Maybe there'd even be a swimming pool, although he did wonder about that name. Over the crest of the next hill, Ishtar saw the city of Zelzele rise from the sand. "That's it?" he shouted to Kazim. He was expecting a city of stone and gold like Amaranth. Instead, he saw a mishmash of houses made of mud, all built into the rocks of a cliff, and all leaning this way and that. Why would anyone want to live there? The caravan circled outside the town, and everyone began their usual chores, but now with excitement in their work. A town, any town, was better than the desert. A short time later, Salamar returned on foot, walking with a man and a boy. Ishtar's guards started to go over to search them, but Salamar waved them away. "He's twice my father's age," Ishtar thought of the man, who wore a long beard, a strange cap on his head, and a torn and dirty tunic. The boy, about Ishtar's age, was even worse, covered in dust and dirt, and wearing a ragged and stained tunic. He was as skinny as a lizard and kept his eyes to the ground. Ishtar stared in disbelief. "Ishtar," Salamar said, "this is my friend Moez and his son Nami. They are guests in our tent." Ishtar stared at the boy and could think of absolutely nothing to say except the standard greeting he'd been taught. "May the sheep on 1,000 hilltops grace your father's flock, and may you find peace and joy among the tents of my father." The boy looked up at Ishtar, scrunched up his nose, and said, "How come you talk so funny?" Ishtar has felt what it's like to get sucked in by quicksand. Without someone there to save him, he might well have been consumed by the desert. Fortunately, there is one by his side who will never leave him, not for anything. Kazim has dedicated his life to protecting the young prince, and he will never waver from that duty. It's doubtful that you or I will ever stumble onto quicksand, but there are many things in life that want to consume and destroy us, things that are bad for us, but that look like fun, or emotions like hate and jealousy that pretend to make us feel good. Fortunately, there is one who stands beside us and will never leave us, not for anything. In fact, he specifically said, I will never leave you or forsake you. He's there every moment of our lives to help us, protect us, and guide us. Like Ishtar, we might start to get sucked in when we're not thinking. But if we realize our mistake and turn to him, Jesus will always be there